Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am glad you found my channel. We will be making more videos in the future. So sit back and relax and drift away while listening to some scary stories. This will be our first episode into season 1. Enjoy. The Quiet Town. Once in a quiet little town, there stood an old decrepit house at the end of a winding road, overgrown with weeds and shrouded in a thick fog that seemed to cling to it like a shroud. The townsfolk whispered tales of the house, calling it the Whispering Manor. It had been abandoned for decades, ever since the final owner, an eccentric painter named Eleanor, disappeared one stormy night, leaving behind her haunting artworks, a collection of portraits of people who had never existed. Curiosity got the better of a group of teens one Halloween night. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they made their way to the manor, daring each other to enter. As they crossed the threshold, a chill swept through the air, and the creaking floorboards seemed to moan under their weight. The walls were adorned with Eleanor's paintings, each one seemingly following them with its gaze. There was something unnerving about them, but the group dismissed it, laughing off their unease. Exploring the dimly lit rooms, they stumbled upon a hidden staircase leading down to a cellar. The air grew colder as they descended, and the faint sound of whispers filled their ears, growing louder with each step. "It's just the wind," one of them insisted, though they all felt a shiver run down their spines. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a room filled with canvases, each one depicting a person with an eerie, hollow gaze. The whispers intensified, almost as if the paintings were trying to communicate. Suddenly, one of the canvases caught the attention of Sarah, the bravest of the group. She reached out and touched the surface, which felt unnaturally warm. In an instant, the room plunged into darkness. The whispers turned into a cacophony of anguished wails. Panic surged through them, and they scrambled back up the stairs. But the staircase now seemed endless, stretching beyond reality. They felt as though unseen hands were clawing at them, pulling them back into the abyss of the cellar. With sheer determination, Sarah broke free and reached the door, flinging it open to the outside world. But as the others emerged behind her, they were changed. Their faces looked pale and gaunt, their eyes reflecting the same hollow emptiness as the portraits. They didn't speak. They simply stared at Sarah, as if waiting for something. Terrified, Sarah ran, the echo of whispers trailing behind her, chilling her to the bone. She stumbled out of the manor, heart racing. But when she looked back, the house appeared different. The windows glowed faintly, reflecting back her own terrified expression. As she turned to flee, a terrible realization hit her. Her friends weren't following her. They were merging with the shadows of the manor, becoming a part of the whispers, just like Eleanor. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah never spoke of that night. When asked about her friends, she forced a smile, but she could see them in the distance, standing outside the manor, eternally waiting for someone to join them. The townsfolk noticed how she began to paint again, pouring her anxiety and grief onto canvas, each stroke taking form in a haunting visage of her lost friends. But those who looked closely would see their eyes appeared hollow, their mouths twisted in silent screams, trapped forever in a cycle of despair, like Eleanor's original portraits, capturing souls in a frame for eternity. And in that eerie old house at the end of the road, the whispers continued, echoing the names of lost souls, waiting for new ones to join them in their silent torment. The Whispering Pines. In a small, forgotten town nestled between dense woods, there was an old legend of the Whispering Pines. The townspeople warned their children never to venture near the forest after dusk, for it was said that the trees could talk, sharing secrets and dark thoughts of those who passed beneath their shadowy canopies. Many dismissed it as a simple tale, but one particular boy, Tommy, was drawn to the woods like a moth to a flame. One brisk autumn evening, fueled by bravado and curiosity, Tommy decided to defy the warnings. He slipped away from home, his heart pounding with excitement and a hint of dread. The sun dipped below the horizon as he approached the tree line, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to beckon him closer. Smiling bravely, he stepped inside the forest, the crunch of leaves underfoot echoing like whispered warnings. As he ventured deeper, the air grew cooler, and an unsettling silence enveloped him, broken only by the soft rustling of the pine needles overhead. Suddenly, he heard it, a low murmur that sent chills down his spine. He stopped and strained to listen. There it was again, a chorus of hushed whispers swirling through the branches, as if the very trees were engaged in a hushed conversation about him. "Tommy, Tommy, come play with us." The voices chimed, soft yet sinister. Ignoring the knot of fear tightening in his stomach, he called out, "Hello, who's there?" The whispers paused, then erupted into a cacophony of laughter. Panic surged through him, but curiosity kept him rooted to the spot. He took a step forward, his foot crunching a twig, breaking the tension. "Come closer, Tommy," the whispers crooned, and the trees swayed gently, as though in sync with the beckoning voice. "We have so much to show you." His heart raced, but he pushed through the fear, driven by a desire to uncover the secret. As he moved deeper into the woods, the moon rose high, illuminating a small clearing surrounded by ancient pines. In the center stood an old, gnarled tree with twisted branches that seemed to reach for the sky. The whispers grew louder, filling his mind with chaotic thoughts, sweet promises of adventure and friendship. "Touch the tree, Tommy. It holds the answers," they urged, the sounds blending into a hypnotic song. Against his better judgment, Tommy approached the tree. Its bark felt cool and alive beneath his fingertips. The moment he touched it, a rush of energy coursed through him, and the whispers turned to shouts. "You belong to us now. Join us." Terrified, he attempted to pull away, but it was too late. Roots erupted from the ground, wrapping around his legs and pulling him toward the tree. Desperate, he screamed for help, but there was no one around to hear him. The branches twisted down, encircling his body like skeletal arms, and the whispers transformed into sinister laughter that reverberated through the forest. Days turned to weeks, and Tommy was never seen again. The townsfolk resumed their lives, whispering about the boy who ignored their warnings. But at night, on the edge of the forest, they began to hear a new voice, soft and pleading, mingling with the echoes of laughter. "Come play with us. Join us." And from the whispering pines, the treetops swayed gently, telling a new tale, a tale of a boy who had become one with the forest, forever a part of the law, forever whispering the secrets of the dark woods to anyone brave enough to listen to. Title: The Last Show. In the small town of Maplewood, the arrival of the carnival was a celebrated event. Colourful tents sprouted in the field on the outskirts, and laughter echoed through the streets as families flocked to enjoy the rides and games. But this year, there was an unusual buzz surrounding the circus. Whispers filled the air about the clowns of carnage, a troupe said to possess a darker, more sinister edge. Among the townsfolk, a group of teenagers, Sam, Lily, Jake, and Mia, were drawn to the flickering lights and intoxicating sounds coming from the fairgrounds. Excited chatter filled their mouths as they approached, unaware of the ominous energy swirling around the tent. "Did you hear?" Jake said, his eyes wide with excitement. "They say these clowns perform real magic." Lily rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her curiosity. Real magic, or just a gimmick? "I want to see it," Mia squealed, tugging at Sam's arm. "Let's go see the clowns." They paid for their tickets and entered the tent, a labyrinth of shadows and brightly colored fabric. The air was thick with the smell of popcorn and something else, something metallic that left a coppery taste on their tongues. As they settled into the rickety benches, the lights dimmed, and the master of ceremonies, a tall, gaunt figure in a pinstripe suit, stepped onto the stage, introducing the clowns. The first performer, Bobo, sent shivers down their spines. Dressed in an oversized suit, Bobo's painted smile felt forced, his eyes eerily empty. He juggled knives, his movements slick and fluid, while the audience cheered uneasily. Sam felt a surge of apprehension as he glanced at his friends. They were enthralled, but something inside him screamed to leave. Next came Twinkle, who danced with a grace that belied her grotesque makeup and unnaturally elongated fingers. Music played, swaying them into a trance as she twirled and leapt, each graceful movement punctuated with an unsettling cackle. Then came the final act, a massive clown named Gloom. He towered over the others, his face obscured by a mask of shadowy paint that seemed to absorb the light. He stepped forward, the air crackling with tension. "Prepare for a show that defies the very nature of joy," he boomed, his voice deep and resonant. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A low growl emanated from Gloom as he raised his arms, and the tent seemed to fold inward, the painted faces rising around them, twisting, contorting, as if they could almost leap from the canvas. The audience was transfixed, but dread welled in Sam's chest. This wasn't magic, it felt like a curse. As if sensing his fear, Gloom locked eyes with Sam and grinned wider, revealing teeth that were too sharp and too jagged, just like the shadows that swarmed in from the edges of the tent. Panic surged through Sam. He turned to his friends, but Mia had already risen from her seat, entranced, moving toward the stage like a moth to a flame. "Come on, Mia, it's not safe," Sam shouted. But all she could hear was the siren song that Gloom sang softly, luring her closer. Jake made a dash for her, but before he reached her side, the tent erupted with chaos. Clowns poured from the walls, their painted faces morphing into horrifying visages. Laughter turned into high-pitched screams that made Sam's blood run cold. "Run!" Sam screamed. He grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her into the crowd that was now pressing toward the exit, a mass of frantic bodies desperate to escape. But Gloom's laughter boomed behind them, echoing like thunder, and as they reached the flap of the tent, an icy hand shot out from the shadows and snagged Sam's ankle. With a cry, Sam fell forward, yanking Lily down with him. They scrambled back to their feet, but behind them, Gloom had emerged from the shadows, taking on a form that was more monstrous than human. "You'll never leave," he bellowed, his eyes glowing unnaturally. As the world around them collapsed into madness, one by one, the other teens were overtaken, their screams mingling with the maniacal laughter of the clowns until silence fell over the field. Hours later, when the townsfolk came to investigate the empty carnival, all that remained was the tent, still and silent, its colors faded. But if you listened closely, you might hear the faint echoes of laughter, a parade of lost souls caught in a never-ending show, waiting for the next unsuspecting audience. In Maplewood, the fair would come again, and the clowns would forever haunt the shadows, their thirst for amusement never slaking, waiting patiently for their next performance.
Once, in a small, forgotten town surrounded by dense, haunting woods, there lived a reclusive old woman named Agnes. The townsfolk whispered that she was a witch, a bearer of dark secrets and powerful magic. Children would dare each other to throw stones at her dilapidated cottage, but they always ran away, terrified of what might emerge from the shadows. One autumn evening, a group of brave teenagers decided to test their courage. They made a pact to sneak into the woods, reach Agnes's cottage after dark, and retrieve her infamous spellbook, a rumored tome filled with enchantments and curses. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they ventured deeper into the forest, the trees looming like sentinels, their branches clawing at the night sky. As they approached the cottage, an eerie silence enveloped them. The door creaked open spontaneously, as if inviting them inside. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. They exchanged nervous glances but pressed on, stepping through the threshold into darkness. Inside, the cottage was filled with the remnants of a life once vibrant. Faded photographs, dusty shelves of strange potions, and herbs hanging from the ceiling. In the corner, obscured by shadows, they spotted a large, leather-bound book on a rickety table. Heart-pounding, one of the boys reached for it, but as his fingers brushed against the cover, a chilling wind swept through the room, slamming the door shut behind them. Panic set in, and they turned to find Agnes standing in the doorway, her face a mask of fury. Her eyes glowed like coals, fierce and unyielding. "You dare enter my home?" she hissed, her voice a low growl. "You have come for what is mine." The teenagers scrambled backward, but the air thickened, making it hard to breathe. Shadows twisted around them, threatening to pull them into the dark corners of the cottage. With every frantic heartbeat, they could feel the oppressive weight of Agnes's anger. Thinking quickly, the bravest girl among them shouted, "We didn't mean any harm. We just wanted to prove we were brave." But Agnes sneered, her mouth twisting into a cruel smile. "Bravery, my dear, has its price." With a flick of her wrist, the spellbook flew open, and the pages began to turn on their own. Strange symbols pulsed on the pages, and the teenagers felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over them as shadows coiled around their legs, pulling them toward the floor. "Choose wisely," Agnes cackled, her laughter echoing in the dim cabin. "One of you must stay, or all of you will be trapped here forever." In a moment of chaos and fear, they looked at each other, torn between saving themselves and the terror of leaving one behind. The shadows grew bolder, whispering promises of power and safety. As the darkness drew closer, desperation filled the room. Just then, the girl who had spoken bravely stepped forward. "I will stay," she declared, her voice trembling but firm. The others protested, but she held her ground, knowing that it was the only way to save their lives. Agnes's grin widened, revealing teeth like jagged stones. "So be it," she said, and with a swift motion the shadows receded. The remaining teens stumbled backward as a gust of wind blew through the cottage, and in an instant they found themselves outside, gasping for air. They turned to look back at the cottage, heartbroken and terrified. The door had swung closed, and all they could hear was Agnes's sinister laughter echoing through the woods. No matter how hard they tried, they could never return to save their friend. Weeks turned into months, and the town eventually forgot about the girl who had sacrificed herself for her friends. But in the deep, shadowy woods, Agnes continued to dwell, her laughter mingling with the rustling leaves, a reminder that some doors, once closed, are never meant to be reopened. And in the darkest corners of the forest, the whispers of the lost echoed endlessly, waiting for the next brave souls to wander into the witch's embrace.